This is Jeff Fedotin with Believe in Chiefs on the Believe Network, Kansas City's #1 sports podcast network, the only place with a show for every team in KC and more. We believe in our teams. Do you believe? On this week's show, former Kansas City Chiefs offensive lineman Joe Valerio and I discuss the latest free agency moves and Orlando Brown's defection to Cincinnati. But first, Joe, we've got to talk March Madness. Your former college rival, Princeton, is the talk of the big dance.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm not happy about it being Princeton, to be honest. It's a big rivalry with us at Penn, but I am happy for the Ivy League making it to the Sweet 16. I think that's a really cool testament to the league and the type of basketball that they play. It's very competitive basketball, and the Ivy League championship. They do a tournament now. They didn't used to do a tournament.
Right.
Just the winner of the Ivy League regular season got the automatic bid, but now they have a little tourney. And Penn took Princeton almost to the hoop in the finals. They lost by 7. So, just keeping everybody up to date on what's going on with the Quakers. But yeah, they kept it close, and it was 77-70. So therefore, I think Penn would have had just as good of a chance of being in the Sweet 16. No, I'm just kidding. You can't use that. You can't use that logic. That doesn't work. I remember one year, Jeff. It's funny talking about Ivy League and football. I remember one year back in the 80s, right before I had gotten to Penn, the Penn had a really good football team. They were 10-0 in the regular season. They actually beat Navy at Navy, which that's a big thing, right? For Penn to beat what is technically a scholarship school, even though Navy doesn't really give scholarships because everybody goes there for free. But so if you use the transitive property. It turned out that year that Penn actually was in running for the national championship for college football because they had beaten Navy, who had beaten someone, who had beaten someone, who had beaten someone, and on and on and on, and went down the line like 72 games. And it turns out that by the transitive property, Penn was the national champion of that season. So we always like to joke about that. But
The
no,
transitive property. It's
yeah,
always good.
yeah.
It's always it never fails. Never
Never
fails.
fails. If someone can beat somebody, then they must be able to beat that person. So, it's fun to think of, but it has been really fun. I think it's been a great tourney so far. I'm
So
doing
many upsets.
okay in our Believe pool. I don't know how you're doing. I'm hanging in there. These upsets are killing a lot of people. So,
Yeah, I think I'm hanging in there. I have 3 of 4 Final Four still live, considering all the upsets. That's all you can really hope for, and a lot of interesting connections with Penn and Princeton. I was texting with my brother who had the same attitude as you do. That he went to Penn, he roots against Princeton, but when it comes to the tournament and stuff, he roots the Ivies above all else. And then the other connection, it's funny, my 2 teams, Northwestern, where I went, Duke, where my dad spent a lot of time, they're both knocked out. But my wife actually went to Princeton, but she's out of town, out of the country. So we've been texting, but I'm really curious. Like, she seems excited, but it will be interesting.
yeah,
She goes out of the country and they have their best season since the 60s. So some
yeah.
crazy connections there. And then the last one, Joe, our buddy Vahe Gregorian, he's obviously columnist for the Kansas City Star with Missouri playing Princeton. He was at that game. He was covering
Oh,
it for the
wow.
Star. So we'll have to, next time we have, obviously he's covering as a journalist and not rooting, but I'm curious what his take of seeing Ivy League beat Missouri to go to the Sweet
Yeah.
16.
Yeah, it was a rough. I know you and I were texting over the weekend. It was a rough weekend for Kansas City area, right? We'll call
Yeah.
Mizzou Kansas City area and KU Kansas City area, and luckily we still have K-State left, for those K-Staters that live in the Kansas City metropolitan area. So lucky to see them still going, and they're making a nice run. But man, seeing KU and Mizzou get knocked out like that was a tough blow. So I know everybody was kind of reverting back to the K-State and the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl. Right? That
Totally.
no one will forget that. So just we're
Absolutely.
still feeling good, even though
And
KU's out.
right. And the last thing before we actually segue into what we're going to talk about mainly on the pod, the K-State at the end of the game has that really cool play where they in the inbounds play where it's like a football play where they have like 4. I don't know if you saw that, where they have
Yeah,
4 guys that it's like they're running routes, and they say they call it the Mahomes. And it's kind of
yeah,
like, it's smart. They have a guy kind of sneak around. They're all going vertical, and one guy pops behind, to kind of get open for the inbound pass.
Great segue into our Believe in Chiefs podcast, not Believe in Kansas City area or Ivy
Or
League
believe in
sports.
Princeton, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Do you believe? But no, this is listen, we joke about this all the time. The NFL and the Chiefs always give us something to talk about, and it's been another exciting week. So I'm excited to chat with our listeners about what we're looking at now and how it's all going to shake out with some of the new signings because they never seem to stop.
Joe, you're in the big signing, of course. Your thoughts on Orlando Brown going to the Cincinnati Bengals?
Yeah, I mean that's a huge, right? It's somebody we're going to see. We're going to play them. We're probably, who knows, probably see him again in the playoffs. And I was a little. I've been very disappointed. Not to pick. I'm not picking on Orlando, but like I've been disappointed with some of the way that players are now approaching free agency, and after they leave, it seems to be very, very contentious.
Mm.
When I was in the league, in the 90s, I mean, obviously I was right smack dab in the middle of the Reggie White, you know, lawsuit against the NFL that, the collective bargaining agreement changed where, now free agency, unrestricted free agency existed, right? And I was right there because up until that point, it was called Plan B free agency, and you could protect all your players even if they were under contract, and you basically were letting go the bottom part of your roster, as opposed to now the top part of your roster ends
Mhm.
up leaving. And I saw it all happen, unfolded right in front of my eyes, as an active player right there, and spending 2 seasons as under the old Plan B free agency, and then the whole lawsuit thing happens, and then it gets unrestricted free agency, and wow, what a difference it's made. But at least back then, and up until now, I mean, maybe it's social media. I don't know. I don't know if fans get frustrated with it or not, but I know I do. That it seems to be like, I don't know. It just seems to be there's always either a sour taste in somebody's mouth, about a contract, and that's why they left. And I mean, look, we had our issues with Orlando this year, and we talked about it, and but it just seemed like he left with such a bad taste, just with some of the things he was saying about getting things put on T-shirts, and that tweet that
Mm.
you and I were sharing. It's just kind of it's really hard to watch right now. It's gonna, I don't know. It seems like it's affecting what I would call the brotherhood of the NFL, and this whole, it's a business thing, and it's becoming very personal, so to speak.
You know, it certainly, Joe, ratchets up the rivalry, don't you think? I mean, this is a team who
Totally.
played each other 4 times in the last 2 years, even though they're not in the same division, 2 AFC championship games. And it was interesting. I did watch Orlando Brown's press conference as a initial with after signing with the Bengals, and he was a very, he praised the Chiefs. He said how much
Yeah.
respect he has for the organization, but it does ratchet up the rivalry. No doubt about that. And Joe, I'm curious from your perspective. All these players, they have to make personal decisions for them, because the team can cut you whenever. The careers are so short. You have to do what's best for you and your family. Joe, this is, going from the Chiefs to the Bengals is a big deal with all the Burrowhead stuff and
Yeah.
the mayor calling out. Joe, I wanted your perspective. You faced a similar dilemma decision. Chiefs Broncos. There was no bigger rivalry back in the day, and you came close to going to the Broncos. Players got to do what's best for him, but is that in the back of your mind when you're making a decision like that, Joe?
Yeah, no, it totally was because, I had, in today's dollars, my God, what a difference. It made the decision. It didn't create this maelstrom that it is today, right? When
Mm-hmm.
you look at the amount of money that's thrown out there, I mean, it was definitely not could be generational wealth or transformative wealth that, by signing with the Broncos or signing with the Chiefs. And, in that particular case, we had a lot going on in the Kansas City area. And, my wife was teaching full time in the Blue Valley School District. I was working at KMBC and doing these, filling in for Len Dawson. We had the radio show on KCFX, like a lot of cool stuff going on that really wasn't worth the extra dollars,
Mm-hmm.
because it wasn't like I said, it wasn't transformational wealth, right? It wasn't something
Mhm.
that was going to set, but now today, you really can't blame these players,
Yeah.
Jeff. I mean, I know, listen, I know fans have their heart, they pour their heart and soul into these teams. And I always did as a fan myself, and everything that I follow, I always pour my heart into it. And I really try to build a sort of that like relationship with the team that you're rooting for, whether it's me rooting for Arsenal in the Premier League, or rooting for the Eagles as a child, and now having been a fan of them because my whole life, and then obviously rooting for the Chiefs because I played there. Like you build these relationships, and fans really take to heart these things when players leave, because but they have to understand that there's only a certain window that these players get. And
Mhm.
when you look at the average length of the salary of the careers, and you look at the numbers, players are going to just they love to play the game of football, and they're going to do it wherever they can, and they can make the most money, because it is a business and it is a job. So it's hard to watch your players go. It's been the money part of football has been probably the thing that has frustrated me the most about what football used to mean for me
Mhm.
as a fan. You
Right.
know, I growing up and watching the Eagles as a child, the teams that I rooted for, they were the same players every year, no matter whether they were 1-15 or 15-1. I still rooted for them the same
Mhm.
way I would no matter what. But they were always the same guys. Of course, players retire. Sometimes they get traded, but trades were so minimal back then. And I think it's really hard. I think it's hard for fans to watch rosters turn over like this. I mean, one of the cool things that I saw, read about, was how excited people were that Nick Allegretti
Yeah.
was staying, and because he's going to provide some stability
Mhm.
and experience to a team as we watch this offensive line start to turn over, right? With Andrew Wiley gone, and with Orlando Brown Jr. gone, and new players coming in at the backup, like you got to have that consistency somewhere. And I was, that's actually what we should be really celebrating is some of the some of the consistency that we are getting.
And I think we were both surprised about that we thought he started before, done a good job. I thought if I think another team would have been wise to sign him for a starting job. Joe, I'm also curious, leaning on your perspective, when you came close to signing with the Broncos, was it in the back of your mind like, oh man, this is a rival, this would be really weird going from Kansas City to Denver, or do you not think about that when you're in
No,
Orlando's
I, I,
position?
I totally thought about it. I mean, I thought about what it was going to be like coming back into Arrowhead, or having the coaching staff and the team come into to Mile High. Like I thought about what that would feel like, right? Or
Hmm.
what that would feel like putting on that, baby blue helmet with the D on it. Like that was an interesting thought about what that would feel like. And I'm a creature of habit and familiarity. So, it didn't feel natural, even though Alex Gibbs was my line coach in Kansas City for 2 years, and then he ended up going as assistant head coach to Mike Shanahan and became his line coach. Um, you know, I kind of like went with the familiarity. It just felt odd, being there, because it wasn't the team that drafted me, and I just felt like, what, maybe I need to see, what'll happen here. Now, the things that I think Nick Allegretti, to use him as an example again, he might be looking at is, we don't know how long Joe Tooney has left,
Hmm.
right? And, they could be telling them, look, Nick, you're coming in on this, did he sign a 1 year deal, I
I
think,
think it was a
Jeff,
one-year deal. Yeah.
you're coming on this 1 year deal. Let's see how it works out for you, because we don't know how long, Joe Tooney's going to be around, right? He started to feeling a little bit of injury here and there, missed some games
Hmm.
last year. So they could be telling him, look, when it comes down to doing, because this is what they told me, and I'm not speaking, sour grapes about the Chiefs
Hmm.
organization, but one of the things that they told me when I did resign was, with free agency coming up for Dave Zott, Tim Grunhard, and Will Shields, basically they said, Joe, there's probably no way that we're going to be able to re-sign all of them.
Hmm.
And lo and behold, around October, November of the year after I signed, and they did. And it was a little bit, actually, I'm not to be sour grapes.
Mhm.
It was a little frustrating because I had been told that there was no way, and then I would slot into one of those spots once,
Mhm.
they couldn't re-sign everybody. They could be telling Nick the same thing. Look, Nick, sign this 1 year deal. And, when Creed and Trey's rookie contracts are up, and they're still going to have to pay Jawan Taylor, right? He's got $60 million guaranteed money over 4 years. They're going to have to pick up a right tackle at some point, right? And
They can't pay all those guys,
they can't
especially
pay all those guys. So they could
Creed.
be,
Creed's going to be have to be like maybe the highest paid, as young as he is, the highest paid center in the NFL. Yeah, they
he
can't.
just might be. So this could be a good play for Nick to slide into a spot like a Joe Thuney where they're not going to be able to keep him, right? It's just with his numbers. So that's the interesting caponomics that, you have to think about, not just the money of how they fit it all in, but how does it look this year, next year, and the year after with the players that you want to keep around. So I think this is a good thing for Nick. And I think if I had a crystal ball, I would say that he'll sign a long-term contract once they decide what they're going to do with Creed and Trey, because they're not getting rid of those two guys. They're
Right.
just not. They're just too valuable, and you build that around Jawan Taylor as your tackle, and then all of a sudden you get a Nick Allegretti comes in, and bam, and you've got a solid line for a long time. Nothing against Joe Tooney, but he is getting up there.
Yeah, but great insight there, Joe, and glad that the Chiefs are bringing back another number 73. Well, Bet Online remains your number one source for all your college basketball betting this season. Get analysis of every play, prop, and point at Bet Online. You'll find the latest odds, bracket contests, team matchups, and game trends at Bet Online. Updated odds for everything from live games, the conference championships, right through the Final Four and championship game. Bet Online is your college basketball headquarters this season. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to sign up and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Be sure to use promo code BELIEVE to receive your bonus. Bet online where the game starts. So, Joe, now I'm curious your take on how this moves the needle. Orlando Brown to the Bengals. How much does this help the Bengals? Does it hurt the Chiefs? Does it really not move the needle as far as with these two heavyweights in the AFC jockeying for kind of AFC supremacy?
Well, I mean, look, it definitely shores up something for the Bengals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how well Orlando plays for them, he's an upgrade, right?
Yeah,
I know
right.
they spent a boatload of cash for him, but he's an upgrade. We know that line struggled, and especially towards the end of the season with some injuries and things like that. So I think this
Especially
is,
in that AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. That was, in my opinion, really the difference in the game.
yeah. So I think they sort of I think they got more than we did, even though the two, let's just call, let's call them, let's call Jawan Taylor and Orlando Brown Jr. similar players.
Mm-hmm.
Just for sake of argument, right? Kind of a wash as talent goes. The Bengals got more for what they needed.
Mm-hmm.
And the Chiefs just ran in place, right? And maybe we don't know yet, right? Is Jawan Taylor going to be the guy? The verdict's not there. At least we knew what Orlando could do. We knew
Mm-hmm.
what he had. So Jawan in this Chiefs system is still an unknown. We know he's got the he's got the versatility. We know he's big. We know his measurables are there. He's durable. He doesn't get penalties. He's disciplined. So we know he can play. It's not a factor of that. But I just think it's just really interesting. That's a great question, Jeff. Like, who wins more? I think the Bengals actually get the nod there, based on the amount of upgrade that they got.
I do too. And again, we talked about this last pod. So I think the Bengals get the kind of win there if you're you're taking a ledger of these type of things, taking receipts. But the Bengals really, I think they are going to miss those two safeties, Von Bell and Jesse Bates, who signed elsewhere. I think that was a big part of why they had some success. I mean, against Mahomes, nobody really has that much success, with relative success. And it's interesting. I think it seems to me, as I was crunching the numbers, they gave Orlando Brown a lot of guaranteed money, the Bengals did, and a lot of it up front. And I think they were able to do that because Burrow's still on his rookie deal, real cheap this coming year. A little more expensive in the option year in the fifth year, but still cheaper than a premier quarterback. And Joe, I also wanted to talk about I really like two kind of under the radar signings the Chiefs had. Charles Omenihu had 54 quarterback pressures last year for the Niners, according to Pro Football Focus. He can play defensive line, or excuse me, interior on the defensive line or at defensive end. And Drew Tranquil, I'm curious what they're going to do with him. He was a good player for the Chargers, 146 tackles, 5 sacks. What do you think about that, Joe?
I thought, I think there are two great pickups. I think Amenahu I mean, he's going to see a lot of time. I mean, he's really going to be in there helping that defensive line really form, where they need to go. And I think maybe he gives us maybe a better regular season run than Frank did. I know you mentioned that on the last pod that Frank seemed to be a playoff player. But I think Charles Omenihu will be an absolute force for us. I think he'll be, he's young. He's again pretty durable, and I think that's a really really good pickup. And Drew Tranquil, I mean, come on, the name doesn't get any better than that, right? I love it, Tranquil. You don't want him to be tranquil when you play linebacker, but I really like him. I think he's gonna be in one of those rivalry type situations, right? He's coming to the Chiefs after having gotten beat around by the Chiefs for the last little bit here. So I think
Yeah.
he's gonna
Speaking, sorry to interrupt, Joe, but speaking of you contemplating a move to Denver and Orlando Brown going to Cincy, this guy's going in his Division Two, Chargers to Chiefs.
yeah, definitely provides a lot of depth, and he definitely, I think, raises the profile. You threw out some great stats there, Jeff. I think he's they're not like making the big headline ESPN splash chyrons at the bottom of the screen, but they're definitely going to make an impact for the Chiefs as Brett Veach continues to build this out. I'm glad to see that they keeping Jody Fortson around. I think that was an easy one because he was already an exclusive rights free agent. I think that was a great one. I mean, Mike Edwards at safety. I mean,
That's another
he
one.
had he had a pretty much he had a career season. I mean, that was his best season he's had. So I'm thinking, I know, losing Juan Thornhill, they lured him away in Cleveland, but I think they're definitely doing the right things, going toe to toe with the league right now. I think we're going to be in a good spot. This wide receiver thing's got me a little concerned. It's not that it's getting late in the game. It's only March 20th, but when we're recording this, but I think the wide receiver thing is something I'd like to see them try to settle sooner rather than later. And I don't know if OBJ is the answer, Jeff. I don't know if you feel that way. I was going to ask you about that. If you wanted to opine on whether or not you think OBJ is the right guy. Does he bring the right chemistry to this team? And has he really done anything in the last couple of years that would say, yeah, Patrick Mahomes has to have that guy?
Right. No, I'm kind of with you on that. And also, I've got so much comfort. Yeah, there are a lot of question marks, but after last year, I'm kind of thinking we could throw anybody out there receiver with Mahomes. But your point, Joe, that these aren't the acquisitions you're going to see on a scroll on when watching ESPN. But I sometimes think these like finding good value, these low profile signings are the way you build winners. Remember how before they're the Commanders, the Washington Redskins would win the offseason every year with these big signings.
Yeah.
Deion Sanders and Bruce Smith spending Albert Hainsworth spending all this, and it would never work out. So I
Yeah.
really do like these, and I still like the Taylor acquisition a lot. It's his pass blocking numbers statistically by Pro Football Focus and all those type of groups were a lot better than his run blocking. So his run blocking might be a concern, but I mean, what we really are we're a passing
Yeah.
off. We need to
Yeah.
protect Mahomes. So the fact that his pass blocking numbers are so good, I think he might actually be a better fit than Orlando Brown on our offense. Who, it's funny, we're talking about right tackle versus left tackle a lot on our last pod. God, it really seems. I know because of his dad, and I know the left tackles make more money, but I really think Orlando Brown would be a dominant right tackle where he could just use his massive frame and be a mauler.
Yeah, that was he could have been miscast there a little bit, but obviously we needed him there, right? We needed
Mm-hmm.
to fill that void, and um, you know, I I always wonder, Brett Veach and Andy Reid definitely, as much whether you love him or hate him, and I know he's got probably a lot more haters than he has loves. Um, the Chiefs as a dynasty, right? Can we call them a dynasty right now with
I think
five
we
Super
need.
Bowl?
I think they're on the precipice of a dynasty. I think they need a third ring, which I think they're going
Yeah,
to get it at some point. They need a you need a third ring in a certain amount of time to be
yeah, yeah. I mean, five AFC Championship games, three Super Bowls, two wins. I mean,
pretty close.
we're hovering around the
Yeah.
moniker.
Hmm.
Um, but I think what the Chiefs are definitely doing is taking a page out of Bill Belichick's
Hmm.
playbook, right? And again, that was my original comment about whether you love him or hate him. Um, he always seemed to find ways to build things around Tom Brady that with not the guys that weren't scrolling at the bottom of the
Right.
ESPN,
Right.
Chiron there. You think back and you know, as many Super Bowls as they won as an organization, I'm telling you, there's still a lot of diehard football fans, that not Patriot fans, but other football fans around the NFL. You can't even remember some of the guys on the team. I mean, yeah, you've got Gronk, right? But like, running backs and receivers like Edelman, but then who were the other two receivers?
Right.
Like
Gronk even
there,
was only there for the back half of it. The
he
beginning,
really was.
right? The first couple. Um, I think Gronk won 3 rings. The first, I think he won 3 rings or so with the Patriots without him. So
Yeah. So I think they're taking a page out of that, like get guys that can do their jobs, build the talent to fit the playbook, right? And fit the playbook to build the talent. And that's what Belichick did so masterfully to create. And I think them we can call a dynasty, having won, 6 Super Bowls. But like, and it was pretty short time with a repeat in there, right? The last team to repeat. I mean, he didn't do it with the all pro rosters. I'm telling you, I think the Chiefs, we could be onto something here. I think Brett Veach, it could be our secret sauce, right? That separates this team from the rest is doing the right thing and getting the right chemistry together and not worrying so much about making the big splash in free agency or even quite frankly in the draft, Jeff.
totally, I'm looking it up. That he and the first 3 titles again were without Gronk. And if you look at the skill players, they had their last one pre Gronk. They had Corey Dillon, a running back who's fantastic, but then
Yeah.
the receivers, David Patton, David Givens, Deion Branch, who's a good player,
Yeah. I mean, no, no.
Troy Brown. They were, the kind of more workmanlike
Yeah.
guys than later on in the Patriots dynasty.
Yeah. They were, I mean, they were obviously, of course, they're good. They're in the NFL, but they're not pick a receiver, they're not Michael Irvin or
Mhm.
receivers that back in the 90s that were if you had one of those guys on your roster you were destined to go to the playoffs, right? I mean, it's pretty interesting to see how this team is being built. I kind of like it. I think it has a very, like, I use the term workman's like mentality to this organization, the way that they just grind things out. And I mean, think about it, Jeff. We never went to the Super Bowl in the 90s. We came awfully darn close. I would say we probably, like, from a up and down the roster perspective, probably had more superstars during that
Yeah.
era than even this team does. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes is special and Travis is special, but when you look at some of those teams in the 90s, Derek Thomas, Neil Smith, I mean, all pro safeties and cornerbacks at one point we
Mhm.
had, right? With Deron Cherry, Lloyd Burris, Kevin Ross, Dale Carter. I mean, Albert Lewis. I mean, all Pro
Yeah.
Bowlers all over the place. Joe Montana, Marcus Allen. But I think, I just think it's a really good philosophy, and I'm glad that Brett Veach is working with Andy on it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when you have the difference, of course, when you have Mahomes and Reed, you can really just build around Mahomes and kind of the universe around him. Joe, the last note on free agency. It's funny, one of the teams who I really like what they did, I thought they were going to break up a little bit. The Philadelphia Eagles. They were able to keep Jason Kelsey, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, both cornerbacks. Bradbury and Slay, who I thought they were going to, they've had some losses, Hargrave, but they have a deep defensive line. They have Jordan Davis, who I think is going to get more playing time. I thought Miles Sanders and Andre Dillard were replaceable. Gardner Johnson is a big loss, but they have the 2 first-round picks. And I really like how they've kind of hung in there and able to resign more players than I thought they would. I'm almost wondering, it's very early, if we could get Chiefs Eagles once again in the Super Bowl.
It's an absolute possibility, right? Depending on what Jalen Hurts can do, with this continuing to sort of evolve in this offense that they're running with this RPO. I mean, that's an absolute possibility. I don't know. I'm sure there's some Vegas odds out there that Bet Online could help us with, and seeing what the Super Bowl matchup might be. But I would imagine that the odds are better than others, right? That it could be a Chiefs Eagles rematch, just depending on how it all went.
Great stuff there, Joe. Well, if you enjoyed this show presented by Bet Online, please subscribe. We're available on your favorite directories: iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Luminary, and TuneIn. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week.